Hello, you're welcome back to Cell and Tissue Organization course. Under the previous session, that is Unit 1, Session 2, we looked at cell types, that is prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells, and some example of organisms that have prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. And we ended the session with unicellular and multicellular organisms and examples of organisms that fall under each. So for Unit 1, Session 3, we'll be looking at the cell wall and the cell membrane. So at the end of this session, you should be able to describe the cell wall, state one function of the cell wall, and also describe the fluid mosaic model of the cell membrane, and name two scientists who first described the cell membrane. Now let's start. So to start with is the cell wall. So the cell wall can be found in plants, prokaryotes, fungi, and some protists, and it's mainly composed of cellulose. And the cellulose is a polysaccharide that is secreted by the outer part of the cytoplasm. And the cell wall is composed of primary and secondary walls. And the primary walls are the first set of layers that are secreted by the outer part of the cytoplasm, whereas the secondary wall are the subsequent layers that is produced by the outer part of the cytoplasm. And so the secondary wall are often deposited in several laminated layers, and this makes it strong and durable. And for that matter, the secondary wall provide protection and support to the wall. And between the area that is found between the primary wall of one cell to the adjacent to that of adjacent cell is the middle lamella. And this middle lamella is formed from an organic material referred to as the pectin. And so also the cellulose cell wall, on it are narrow pores that carry fine strands of cytoplasm, and these fine narrow pores carrying fine strands of cytoplasm are referred to as plasmodesmal strands or plasmodesmata. So the function of this plasmodesmata is to facilitate the movement of materials between one cell to that of the other. And the cell wall is semi-permeable, and so it prevents the excessive uptake of water, even though it enhances the movement of materials between one cell to the other. It prevents the excessive intake of water. And the cell wall, its main function is that it gives protection and maintains the shape of the cell. However, it's considered not to be a living part of the cell. It's a non-living part of the cell, but rather provides protection and also helps in maintaining the shape. Now let's look at the cell membrane. The cell membrane, which is also referred to as the plasma membrane, separates the interior of the cell from the outside environment. And it was first described by Davison and Danieli in 1935. And according to them, the cell membrane is a biomolecular lipid layer sandwiched between two protein layers. However, further study by Singer and Nicholson confirmed the lipid part of the plasma membrane, but not the protein layer as described by Davison and Danieli. And so Singer and Nicholson proposed the fluid mosaic model of the plasma membrane. And according to them, the plasma membrane, the membrane proteins take the form of globules inserted at various points of the biolipid layer in a mosaic pattern, but not as described by that of Davison and Daniel. Further experiments by Singer and Nicholson proved that the cell membrane is not rigid, and so they carry on with viscosity experiments on the cell membrane, and they suggested that the cell membrane is of a fluid consistency. And so according to them, they said the fluid mosaic model of the cell membrane depicts the cell membrane as a fluid structure with a mosaic of various proteins embedded in it or attached to a double layer of phospholipids. And so now the cell membrane is known to be perforated at regular intervals by pores lined by hydrophilic groups of proteins. And also the cell membrane is partially or selectively permeable by processes such as the diffusion, osmosis, and active transport. And so the cell membrane also serves as a barrier that helps in the movement of substances into and out of the cell. And then also the cell membrane is known to be lined by a polysaccharide, that is carbohydrate chains on it. And also the cell membrane's main function is that in animal cell is that it protects the intracellular structures of the animal cell. And so figure 3 gives us shows a representative diagram of a cell membrane whereby the biomolecular lipid layer are being intercepted with protein molecules, and and along it also we have the carbohydrate complex. Now I want you to try this question. Can you put down a sentence to describe the fluid mosaic model of the cell membrane as described by Singer and Nicholson? Hope you were able to do it. So this brings us to the end of Unit 1, Session 3. And under this unit, we've learned the two most important parts of the cell, which is the cell wall and cell membrane. And we looked at their functions. And so we also look at the cell wall, it being present in plant cells and forming the outermost layer of plant cells. We also observe that the cell membrane forms the outermost covering of animal cells and is present in both plant and animal cells. We also looked at the fluid mosaic model as proposed by Singer and Nicholson.